Cincere Pettus, also known by his adopted name, Orrin West, was only 4 years old when his life was ended at the hands of his adopted parents, now 36-year-old Trezell West and his wife, 33-year-old Jacqueline West. Classic Pettus, also known as Orson West, was only 3 when his life was ended. It is suspected that Jacqueline and Trezell are responsible for Classic's death, but they have not yet been convicted. However, they did receive a guilty verdict on child cruelty as to Classic and are suspected of abusing them both along with the other 2 adopted children. So I did throw a trigger warning on the banner. I probably should say this before I started, but this is going to be a major trigger warning throughout this. It's very, it's graphic and it's very sensitive content being discussed, having to do with children being harmed at the hands of the people that they were supposed to trust the most. All right. Prosecutor Eric Smith has said the Wests, who had 6 children, were abusive to the adopted ones, and in September 2020, 4-year-old Orrin, also known as Cincere, lost his life. If you're the praying type, please pray for all of these children, no matter their level of trauma. It's unfortunate all the same, and they all deserve adequate and proper care and resources for what they've been through, which only they know. If you're not the praying type, please just send good, positive thoughts and energy to these children. They may not even understand it yet, what they've went through, because they're so young, and they may never understand it. But their parents, Jackie and Trezell, were obviously mentally ill, and in such a way that requires them to exist in the prison system for the rest of their lives, where they are being held accountable for their heinous crimes, or a majority of them, by the American justice system. The Wests then came up with a plan after ending 4-year-old Cincere's life to end 3-year-old Classic's as well and dispose of the bodies. I know there may not be answers that currently exist for these questions outside of what Jackie and Trezell and possibly a co-conspirator know. But my first question is, when did little 3-year-old Classic pass? And was it right after his older brother Cincere's life was taken? As I have heard, it may have been about a week, or was it sooner? And then Trezell and Jackie, or a co-conspirator, took the brothers' precious remains and placed them somewhere together? Or did they place the remains somewhere on 2 separate occasions, in the same place or in a different place? I have a lot of questions, and maybe I missed some things in the trial that I may get an answer to from someone listening, or to questions that I have as we go through this. But these are things that I really want to know. Was Classic injured at the same time as Cincere and passed at a later date? Did Classic and Cincere pass away due to injuries that they suffered? And did they suffer these injuries at the same time? So what I mean by that is, did they pass away? Did they get injured and then at a later date pass away due to those injuries? I guess I'm just trying ultimately to understand something that I will never understand, because ultimately what I'm trying to determine is what could possibly have happened to a little 3 and 4-year-old innocent child, and what caused it. Are Jackie and Trezell both really just that evil? How can it be that the human brain could allow someone to do such crimes to a person, especially a child, and to 2 of them? I cannot wrap my mind around it. I naturally just endlessly fixate on it because I want to understand what could be happening in a person's mind that could cause them to want to harm a child, let alone 2 children. This is a problem worldwide, and it happens every day. It's tragic, and I wish there was a way to study it to prevent it. I suppose awareness is a great tool for prevention. It's just a matter of identifying those that need the awareness. I don't know. I just there was a way to prevent these tragedies better. When a California City police officer interviewed the four surviving children the day after Classic and Sincere were reported missing, they all said the same thing, that they had not seen their little brothers for weeks. Sincere was born August 4th, 2016, and Classic was born June 11th, 2017, just 10 months apart. They were born to their mother, Ryan Dean, and Classic to his father, Charles Pettus, taking his last name. Cincere also taking Pettus's last name, his biological father's name being Ralph Mosley. The two brothers were so close in their short time on Earth and had such rough lives. Cincere was taken to the hospital at just 3 months old, where it was discovered he had broken bones in his leg, and he was then removed from his mother's care for suspected child abuse. If I remember correctly, his thigh bone was like twisted forward, which is a pretty dramatic injury. I don't know. So I don't know, maybe someone does though, but it could have been the man that she was with and not her that did the abuse. Although she did not report the abuse, if that's the case, which is very tragic. Either way, um, I don't know her situation, but like I said, it's just tragic all around. I can't imagine the pain that Classic and Sincere's mother must feel and that their fathers must feel regardless, knowing what has happened to their sons. So Ryan Dean, their mother, did regularly attend visits with Cincere several days a week and fought to get him back. Classic was born 10 months after Cincere, and he was removed from her care 11 days after having him home with her because of the concern for child abuse in the home due to Cincere's injuries. Ryan took parenting classes and filed for reunification, but did not regain custody of her children at any point. Ryan Dean's mother, Dana Moorer, claims to have filed a request to have the children placed with her, but in 2019, the department revoked Ryan's parental rights without explanation and denied Moorer's placement request for Classic and Sincere. After the Kern County Department of Human Services suspected abuse and placed Cincere in emergency foster care, a month later, he was placed in an established Bakersfield foster home, which was operated by LaToya Spry. Classic was then brought nearly a year later to the same foster home where they were then, fortunately, reunited. During the trial, Spry testified that Classic and Sincere were removed from her home in 2018 after her daughter went to school with a scrape on her leg. Abuse was feared, so the boys were removed. There never were criminal charges against Spry, but the boys, then about 1 and 2 years old, were removed from her home at the terrible judgment of the state, placed with Trezell and Jacqueline West. So, Classic and Cincere were under the care of Jacqueline and Trezell West by late 2018. The Wests, unfortunately, officially completed the adoption process in April 2019, no longer fostering but officially having adopted them. Then, about a year and a half later, Classic and Sincere were both reported missing at the same time out of California City, California, around 5 p.m. on December 21st, 2020, by their adopted father, Trezell West. The boys, 4-year-old Cincere and 3-year-old Classic, are still missing and believed to both be deceased. Prosecutor Eric Smith said surveillance footage shows no one could have taken the boys from the West's California city home on the night the couple reported them missing, which was December 21st, 2020. Instead, the evidence will show that Classic and Cincere died sometime in September of 2020. Jacqueline and Trezell West have both been charged in connection to Cincere and Classic's deaths, convicted only in Cincere's with lesser charges as to Classic. They were both found guilty by a Kern County jury in Bakersfield, California on May 18, 2023, the verdict being announced the very next day. The Wests were convicted of, in regards to 4-year-old Orrin, aka Cincere, Trezell and Jacqueline West were found guilty of murder in the second degree, involuntary manslaughter, willful cruelty to a child, and false report of an emergency. In the case of 3-year-old Orson West, aka Classic, they were both found guilty of willful cruelty to a child and false report of an emergency. Jurors could not reach a verdict on the second-degree charge and conspiracy to commit charges related to 3-year-old Classic, aka Orson West's death. So Jackie and Trezell were convicted of purposely killing 4-year-old Cincere, but not 3-year-old Classic, nor for the conspiracy to commit in regards to Classic. Although they're highly suspected of it, it cannot be proven beyond a reasonable doubt yet. They were, however, convicted of being willfully cruel to Classic and for falsely reporting that he was missing, but hopefully justice will still be fully served for Classic, although the Wests will likely remain in prison for the rest of their lives regardless. Classic still deserves his full justice. Sentencing in the case is currently set for July 13th, 2023. Prosecutor Eric Smith will announce at that date whether or not California intends to retry the Wests on the two charges as to 3-year-old Classic. Classic and Cincere are believed to have had their lives taken 3 months prior to their reported disappearance in September of 2020, like I said, likely at their Bakersfield, California residence. The Wests moved in September of 2020 from Bakersfield to a house in California City. Then, on December 21st, 2020, Trezell stated just Classic and Cincere, none of the other children, went out back to play with some chalk on the sidewalk while he was out gathering firewood because Jackie was inside wrapping Christmas presents. And she thought it would be a good idea, because of that reason, for Classic and Cincere to go outside and play. So apparently, that's just strange to me, because why would you only have those two go outside? Why not just have them go to their room? Sorry, I had to get a drink. Okay. So Trezell says he left the gate open. He ran inside the house for just a second, and when he came back out, the boys were just gone. So he went inside to ask his wife, Jackie, if she had seen them. And she said no, they should be outside playing with chalk in the backyard. And he says, well, they're not there. So he gets in his car and drives up and down the road in the neighborhood surrounding their 10717 Aspen Avenue apartment and comes back in a very short amount of time, like 5 minutes. That's all the time he thought he should take to search for his two children, two toddlers basically, that he claims wandered out of the gate and may have been picked up by someone and abducted. But Trezell just searches 5 short minutes, allegedly asking one person if he saw two little black boys outside, and then went back home to stand there by a tree till the cops got there, never bothering to check any neighbors' homes or knock on any doors at all. Jackie didn't even come outside, although she tried to say that she did. Surveillance footage shows that she did not. So Trezell just waits patiently outside of his home by the gate where the boys allegedly escaped or were taken from, and he waits for the police to arrive after calling and reporting that he could not find Classic or Cincere. Nobody had seen them in that neighborhood at all, not even their direct neighbors. Not just that day, but ever. That's because when Jackie and Trezell moved with their 4 other children to the apartment in California City, Cincere and Classic were likely both already gone, though the oldest child seems unsure of the last time he saw Classic. It was probably very confusing for the children, especially considering they told them that the children went to stay with Jackie's mom, and whatever else they told them that the children were doing because they cried too much or whatever. That was probably really confusing for the other children, especially the oldest one, because he had to keep that secret, and that's messed up. So he says he remembers hearing what sounded like, the oldest child, when he seemed so unsure of the last time he says he saw Classic, but he says he remembers hearing what sounded like a soap bottle hit the ground one night, not long after Cincere passed. And the other children were told he went to stay with Jackie's mother. On or about September 1st, 2020 to September 20th, 2020, Jackie and Trezell formulated a plan to report a person missing. According to the indictment, a timeline was given regarding the conspiracy charges. It reads, on or about September 17th, 2020, a known co-conspirator, whose name was redacted out of the indictment, killed another person, according to the superseding indictment. In one testimony, the West's oldest child, who was 10 at the time 2 brothers disappeared and was 12 during trial, testified that he found 4-year-old Cincere dead and was then told by his parents to keep quiet about it or he and the rest of his siblings would be taken away from them. And as for Cincere's little body, the boy told jurors he did not know what happened to it. I try not to think too hard about it because it's so awful, but I do wonder what the conversation was like between Jackie and Trezell and their oldest son when they told him he couldn't tell anyone or they would all be taken away from their parents. I wonder if they were sympathetic and nice and acted genuinely concerned that they would lose their other children and were gentle and loving about it, as sick as it really is. Or if they were mean and aggressive about it, attempting to use fear to keep him quiet. I hope they didn't scare him into his silence because he's been through so much as it is. He seemed to have a really hard time telling the police what he really knew because he didn't want to get his parents in trouble. How sad is that? And he didn't want to break his promise. Poor kid. Gosh. That's so sick of Jackie and Trezell and so sad for the oldest child. To put a child through something like that is a form of abuse, mentally and emotionally scarring them for the rest of their life, which could lead to physical and mental struggles for the rest of their life also. And I truly hope this child is getting all the help that he needs and has access to many helpful resources in his community. Really do. The indictment as to Jackie and Trezell reads as follows. All right. It's coming. Ever so slowly loads. Have it saved as a PDF on here. Here we go. All right, so Superior Court of California, County of Kern, Metropolitan Division. The people of the state of California, plaintiff, the first amended indictment versus Trezell West and Jacqueline West defendants. I read that weird, sorry. All right, count 2, Penal Code Section 187, murder. On or about September 1st, 2020 through September 30th, 2020, Trezell West and Jacqueline West did with malice aforethought murder Orson West, a human being, in violation of Penal Code Section 187, second-degree murder, a felony. It is further alleged that the above offense is a serious felony within the meaning of Penal Code Section 192.7. Circumstance and aggravation. It is further alleged that the defendant, Trezell West and Jacqueline West, committed a crime that involved great violence, threat of great bodily harm, or other acts disclosing a high degree of cruelty, viciousness, or callousness with the meaning of California Rules of Court 4.421. Circumstance and aggravation. It is further that the victim, Orson West, was particularly vulnerable within the meaning of California Rules of Court 4.421. Circumstance and aggravation. It is further alleged that the defendant, Trezell West and Jacqueline West, induced others to participate in the commission of the crime or occupied a position of leadership or dominance of other participants in its commission within the meaning of California Rules of Court. Circumstance and aggravation. It is further alleged that the defendant, Trezell West and Jacqueline West, that the manner the crime was carried out indicates planning, sophistication, or professionalism within the meaning of California Rules of Court. Circumstance and aggravation. It is further alleged that the defendant, Trezell West and Jacqueline West, took advantage of a position of trust or confidence to commit the offense within the meaning of California Rules of Court. Count 3, Penal Code Section 273A. On or about September 1st, 2020 through September 30th, 2020, Trezell West and Jacqueline West did willfully harm or endanger Orrin West, a human being, in violation of Penal Code Section 273A, a felony. Circumstance and aggravation. It is further alleged that the defendant, Trezell West and Jacqueline West, committed a crime that involved great violence, threat of great bodily harm, or other acts disclosing a high degree of cruelty, viciousness, or callousness with the meaning of California Rules of Court. Circumstance and aggravation. It is further that the victim, Orrin West, was particularly vulnerable within the meaning of California Rules of Court. Circumstance and aggravation. It is further alleged that the defendant, Trezell West and Jacqueline West, induced others to participate in the commission of the crime or occupied a position of leadership or dominance of other participants in its commission within the meaning of California Rules of Court. Circumstance of aggravation. It is further alleged that the defendant, Trezell West and Jacqueline West, induced a minor to commit or assist in the commission of the crime within the meaning of California Rules of Court. Circumstance and aggravation. It is further alleged that the defendant, Trezell West and Jacqueline West, threatened witnesses, unlawfully prevented or dissuaded witnesses from testifying, suborned perjury, or in any way illegally interfered with the judicial process within the meaning of California Rules of Court. Circumstance and aggravation. It is further alleged that the defendant, Trezell West and Jacqueline West, took advantage of a position of trust or confidence to commit the offense within the meaning of California Rules of Court. Count 4, Penal Code Section 273A. On or about September 1st, 2020 through September 30th, 2020, Trezell West and Jacqueline West did willfully or harm or endanger Orson West, a human being, in violation of Penal Code Section 273A, a felony. Circumstance and aggravation. It is further alleged that the defendant, Trezell West and Jacqueline West, committed a crime that involved great violence, threat of great bodily harm, or other acts disclosing a high degree of cruelty, viciousness, or callousness with the meaning of California Rules of Court. Circumstance and aggravation. It is further that the victim, Orson West, was particularly vulnerable within the meaning of California Rules of Court. Circumstance and aggravation. It is further alleged that the defendant, Trezell West and Jacqueline West, that the manner the crime was carried out indicates planning, sophistication, or professionalism within the meaning of California Rules of Court. Circumstance and aggravation. It is further alleged defendant Trezell West and Jacqueline West took advantage of a position of trust or confidence to commit the offense within the meaning of California Rules of Court. Count 5, Penal Code Section 148.3. On or about December 21st, 2020, Trezell West and Jacqueline West did falsely report an emergency in violation of Penal Code Section 148.3. a misdemeanor. So there was that. The prosecution is saying the Wests are responsible for Classic and Cincere's deaths, saying there was abuse, neglect, and inconsistent statements. The defense is doubting what the witnesses are saying and questioning their credibility, also, not to mention the lack of the most important pieces of evidence, the precious bodies of Classic and Cincere, missing still for nearly 3 years now. Jackie and Trezell's oldest son, now 12, knew his brothers as Orrin and Orson, and he now has a burden he will likely carry forever that he never should have had to carry at all, especially not as a child, and I pray for his peace of mind. How dare anyone ever put something like that on an innocent little child? Jackie and Trezell are where they deserve to be, and I hope there's a special place in hell just for them. I touched his body and it was cold, the young boy says of Cincere in an interview recorded December 28th, 2020, and that's the oldest son. When he was only 10 years old, he touched his body and it was cold. A week after Cincere and Classic were reported missing by Jackie and Trezell, he said that of Cincere, that he touched his body and it was cold, in a police interview recorded just a week after they were reported missing. Imagine what Summer's brothers have told police. They have said more than we know for sure. There may just not be a smoking gun yet in Summer's case, like in Classic and Cincere's case, which obviously was what the children said and all the other evidence they had paired with that. Have faith in the law enforcement and in the justice system. Have faith that Classic will still receive his full justice. Things, unfortunately, do take time. More than anything, though, have hope for Summer to still be alive and never endured anything like this. No matter what has happened to Summer, I'm just saying this is a reminder that things are not always what they seem. The law always knows more than we do. And if they're pleading to the public for help, that means they have nothing. And we do not see that in Summer's case, and we did not see it in Classic and Cincere's. And it took a couple years before we saw charges for Classic and Cincere. The night before, the then 10-year-old boy saw his 4-year-old brother Cincere lifeless. The boy says his parents pureed Cincere's food in a blender, then put it in a baby bottle and made him drink it. He says his parents did this when preparing Cincere's food because Cincere chewed with his mouth open. Like most children do, especially at only 4 years of age. As a parent, you should teach your children table manners and teach them to mind. That's your job as a mother and father, and to be so lazy as to not even want to take the time to sit down beside him and teach him that shows your complete and utter disregard for the child's well-being. But was it truly laziness, or was it just simply to be cruel? So I think it was just simply to be cruel. So Cincere drank the bottle, then stole a drink from his little brother Classic, according to the boy's interview. He says his parents told Classic to punch Cincere, but he didn't see whether Classic hit him or not. The boy then went to bed, he says, and in the night he heard noises, but didn't think anything of it because Classic and Cincere always made noises when they slept. The next morning, however, Cincere was face down on his mattress. Without initially realizing what had happened, he left the room, and when he came back, his parents were crying, and he saw Cincere had vomited and his color was fading, the boy says. The boy says he promised to keep Cincere's death a secret from the other children. They left Casa Loma Apartments on Lotus Lane and moved into the house on Aspen Avenue in California City. A few days later, Orson was gone, the boy says. His parents removed Orson while he was sleeping, he says. One morning he woke up and Orson just wasn't there. He says his parents told him Orson was sent to Jacqueline West's mother's. When Trezell originally reported Classic and Cincere missing around 5 p.m. on December 21st, 2020, police responded immediately and began searching the area. Aerial searches were brought in, cadaver dogs, and even the community organized search parties for the children. Still, the bodies of Orrin and Orson, Classic and Cincere, have never been found. As the prosecution laid out in court, investigators quickly began to suspect foul play on the part of the parents. All of this is based on the statements of 4 children under the age of 11. I've gotten most of this information from kget.com, by the way, which has great coverage of the case. It's kget.com. And then this upcoming information that I'm about to read is coming directly from an article on www.turnto23.com from ABC 23 Bakersfield. And okay. During trial, the defense argued that the investigation was unjustly aimed at Trezell and Jacqueline, and that some of the questions that were asked of the 4 remaining children were leading and suggestive. Then, the prosecution began to highlight ways that their stories didn't match. Side note, I thought this was very interesting. Dr. Susan Napolitano, a child psychologist, testified for the defense that the oldest child's testimony of what happened to Cincere was influenced by exposure to media coverage, days of interrogation, and improper questioning, and she was paid between $35,000 to $42,000 to testify for the defense, and she only reviewed a few of the interviews and not the whole 2,000-page offense report. Wow, right? So the conflicting statements the prosecution brought up were: Jacqueline claimed she had looked for the boys and ran down the street to search, but there was no surveillance video showing this. This part I found very interesting. Call records from that night on December 21st, 2020, when Orrin and Orson, Classic and Cincere, were first reported missing, showed Jacqueline had been on the phone with her oldest son for 4 to 5 minutes during that period. That's about the same amount of time Trezell was, quote unquote, searching. Call records also discredited other statements from Trezell and Jacqueline, like when the family visited Maria Martinez for her birthday on December 5th, Jacqueline said her mother was not home, so they only dropped things off and left. But Martinez, however, said the family stayed while Trezell went to get food, and she didn't recall seeing Cincere or Classic. Cell phone records show the couple in different parts of Bakersfield that day. So they were lying about that. Martinez testified many times that she didn't see the family much after the move to Cal City. She visited once to talk to Jackie, and while she saw several children in the home, she did not focus on who was there. Trezell's mother, Wanda, said that when she went to babysit the West children on September 19th, she knew she was only watching the 4 older boys and assumed Classic and Cincere were with Martinez. However, Martinez said she did not watch the boys. So that's a pretty big one, too. Investigators began to suspect that this was what led the couple to plot. They suspected Cincere died just before the family moved to Cal City, and because they were worried that Wanda would ask questions after seeing Classic, they decided to just kill Classic too. Wow, that's just like bone chilling. The prosecution argued that this gave the couple 3 months to discard the bodies, get rid of their cell phones, and change their numbers and finish moving. Then Christmas approached. During the trial, Wanda and her husband Philip testified that they had been planning to visit the family in Cal City. Wanda even said she had sent presents and asked the couple for a family photo in front of the fireplace. She never got that photo. The prosecution believed this put pressure on the people which ultimately led them to decide to report the boys missing. Again, that was a report from turnto23.com by 23 ABC Bakersfield News. Then I pulled this information that I'm about to read about DNA profiles from websleuths.com. DNA testing conducted on items gathered from Trezell and Jacqueline West's California city home very few matches to the couple's adoptive sons, Classic and Cincere, according to testimony. The used diaper had been collected from the West's trash a year after the investigation began. Kim testified that when he tested the DNA profile against the others, Orson was excluded. So Classic was excluded. Testing to determine if Orson, Classic, should read Orrin per KGET tweets. So it's a little confusing if they're talking about Orrin or Orson here, but regardless, needless to say, they didn't get a lot of matches for either one of them. But it says, was a potential contributor, was inconclusive, Kim said. It really does matter, actually. It really makes a huge difference because we don't know exactly what happened, right? And we don't know where they are. So it is important, actually, to not get them confused. And I do see in a lot of news articles there was even some that I wanted to share and I didn't because they got their names wrong. And I was like, man, how can I believe anything else in this article if they got their names wrong? You know what I mean? So I don't know. But it is easy to mix them up. I understand. So, two of the West's other children could not be excluded from the diaper that they found. So two of the other children, their DNA could not be excluded from that diaper. But there was no match from Orrin or Orson on it. Interesting, right? Out of the various mattress covers and blankets collected from the children's bedrooms, Kim was able to exclude Classic and Cincere as potential contributors for most of the items. For a few items, Kim testified that the sample was a mixture of contributors and he either could not exclude the boys as potential contributors along with other members of the family or testing was inconclusive. Kim also tested DNA samples collected from the car seats within the West van. Here, let me share this tab so you can, if you can follow, maybe you can follow along a little bit better because it is a little bit confusing. Kim also tested DNA samples collected from the car seats within the West's van. He said the samples taken from two of the car seats were also a mixture of contributors, and again, Orrin and Orson could not be excluded as potential contributors. Interesting. Again, that was from websleuths.com, and I believe it was back in April. This next article comes from Bakersfield.com. Officers with the Bakersfield Police Department, California City Police Department, and the FBI tried every angle possible while interrogating Jacqueline West, who's accused of murdering her adoptive toddlers, according to video of the interview played in Kern County Superior Court on Thursday. Not this last Thursday, but we'll just take that out because I don't know exactly what the date of this is. BPD Detective John Ryan repeatedly told her the facts do not add up. There's no surveillance footage of her children, Orrin 4 and Orson 3, which would be Cincere 4 and Classic 3, walking away from Jacqueline West and her husband Trezell West's home on December 21st, 2020. So how could surveillance footage of the California city house show dogs and cars driving, but not a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old kid walking away? Ryan asked in the video. Don't you think that's odd? An officer in the video asked Jacqueline. Jacqueline and her husband, Trezell West, have pleaded not guilty to murder and involuntary manslaughter in the deaths of Orrin and Orson, who were reported missing while they played in their California City backyard. Chief Trial Deputy Eric Smith played interviews with both adoptive parents in their ongoing trial. and spent much of Thursday showing footage to jurors about officers questioning Jacqueline. Ryan told her mistakes happen and she should tell them what really occurred. She's not cried once, and it's perhaps covering up for what Trezell West did, Ryan suggested. By her withholding information, Ryan said in the video footage, she doesn't get to spend Christmas with her kids and now contributes to Ryan not getting to see his own babies for the holidays because he has to keep investigating. Throughout the more than 2 hours, law enforcement interrogated Jackie, tossing out every plea. Jackie West remained firm. She isn't lying and she did not harm her kids. Everything she's saying is being twisted, according to her. If I had answers, I would not have called you guys, she said. Officers were told Jackie, they also told Jackie they'd interviewed the Wests' 4 other children. The Wests have 2 biological and 2 adopted kids aside from Classic and Cincere, and learned the kids had not seen Classic and Cincere for a lengthy period. The 4 children interviewed by a Cal City police officer were staying with their grandmother in Bakersfield, while Classic and Cincere were with their adoptive parents in California City. How can these kids lie? Ryan repeatedly said. Babies are pure and honest, and they will tell the truth, he added. It's unlikely 4 kids will have the exact same story if they're lying, Ryan asserted. Classic and Cincere did not go missing on December 21st, 2020, he suggested, while noting perhaps the Wests created this story because family would start asking questions about Classic and Cincere when gathering to celebrate Christmas. But they do lie, Jackie said, of her 4 kids. She repeatedly said she doesn't know why her kids would say to officers that they haven't seen Classic or Cincere. And she said she wasn't planning on having anyone over for Christmas. Wow. It's a different feeling she has for her biological kids than her adopted ones, she said. But it's not that she doesn't care, it's just a different feeling. Jacqueline clarified when officers accused her of not caring about Orrin and Orson. They're missing, that's all I know, Jackie said. We didn't take them anywhere and we called the cops because that was the right thing to do, she added. But Jacqueline suggested that wasn't the smartest move. She said in the recorded interview that she felt regret for calling Cal City Police. We would have been better off without you, she said. And in regards to Trezell from BakersfieldNow.com, Trezell answered questions from a Cal City police officer and from an FBI agent. During his testimony, Officer Hansen told Prosecutor Eric Smith he and his partner, Officer Cabrielas, was looking for dirty diapers and trash cans and for child shoe prints in the dirt of the West backyard, all in an effort to find any sign of the boys being there. But they did not find either of those. Officer Hansen continued to question in the video and then demanded from Trezell that he wants the truth. Trezell then responded by saying, I told you the truth. The officer then referenced security video from around the time the boys were reported missing and told Trezell that the video never shows the boys. Trezell continued to stress that he was worried and wants his boys. Officer Hansen also asked Trezell what his theory was of what happened to Orrin and Orson, Classic and Cincere. Trezell responded he thought the boys left through the gate and he didn't know what happened to them. The FBI agent, who also interrogated Trezell, expressed his doubt in the adoptive father's story. He then told them that he thinks Trezell was not telling him the truth and that both adoptive parents knew exactly where the boys are. I believe so too. Unfortunately, to this day, the brothers, Classic and Cincere, remain missing, and their adoptive parents, though convicted of killing Cincere and being willfully cruel to Classic, refuse to cooperate and give the information needed to recover their precious remains. It is my great fear that they were disposed of like Quentin Simon in a dumpster and taken to a landfill where they will never be seen again. Quentin Simon was found against great odds, and it was truly a miracle that he was recovered from that landfill. Those searchers are amazing. I hope that is not the case, and Classic and Cincere will at least one day be found and given a proper resting place. I pray for the biological families of Classic and Cincere and for all of their siblings. I cannot even begin to fathom the pain the boys must have went through, and even the other adopted and biological children as well, especially the oldest, who was made to keep secret seeing and even touching his deceased little brother. This is not normal. It's not acceptable behavior in any circumstance. And as I have said, Jackie and Trezell are where they belong. May their lives be long and miserable, and may their surviving children live blessed, happy, peaceful, and successful lives without them. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate you a lot. Thank you for being here for Classic and Cincere, also known as Orrin and Orson. And please, if you're the praying type, just pray for them, pray for all the surviving children. And if you're not the praying type, please just send them light and love. Again, thank you for being here. I really appreciate you. I hope you have a blessed day. Bye.